Ladies and gentlemen, it is 5:30, and I will call this work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. And I just want everyone to know that we're still open for business. People can still come into City Hall, and you can attend in person, or if you would like to view us online, go to burnsvillemn.gov/meetings or Comcast Channel 16 or 859. The public can also participate, if you don't wish to come in, through Zoom by joining us at zoom.us/join. And more information is available on our meeting's webpage and in the council's agenda packet. Now, on work sessions, we go directly to our items that's on the agenda, but this evening, we have one person who would like to speak before we get into our agenda, so I'll ask Sherry. And you can sit between Captain Anselman and Director Mark. Yeah. And give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry Peterson. I live at 10824 Hayes Drive in Burnsville, which is in North River Hills, and I'm a 35-year resident of this amazing community. And the reason I came tonight, first of all, was about the community grants. So this has been on my calendar. And then I am also a member of the Mobile Volunteer Network and was at the high school on Friday night with a couple of my volunteer colleagues working in the parking lots. And I had the great opportunity to meet Mark. He looked important, a bunch of walkie-talkies and a backpack. And anyway, but I spoke to the mayor just a few minutes ago, and probably the biggest reason I am here is to commend and acknowledge the incredible work of all of the police officers, any other first responders that were there that night. I've never seen something get addressed so quickly, efficiently, diplomatically, and a very explosive situation get diffused. And I will never be grateful enough for what they did and never be able to say enough great things about Burnsville PD and everyone that was on site that night and took care of everyone. I also started out that evening at a very beautiful event, like friends, family, the graduates, high fives, hugging, all this excitement. And let's not forget that there were really some great accomplishments that evening as well. It's just that it took a turn nobody saw coming. And I don't know how I or anyone else can ever say enough thank yous to everybody that stepped in and solved what was really a very unfortunate situation. So I would also just say, as a side note, in early November through MVN, I was also part of the active shooter training down at Prince of Peace. And so I had gone through 2 sessions of that, and I don't want to say that I was prepared for it, because you're never really prepared for it, but I had a little bit of experience with the first responders at that point as well. So anyway, if you didn't think this was a great community before, it's an even greater community now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry, for coming in and sharing your experience and what you observed. And also knowing that you did, through MVN, do an active shooter training. And then you had to experience it in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
And Sherry, I'll make sure that I share your comments with the police department.
Yeah.
Deputy Chief
Please.
Smith is here, and certainly Captain Anselman.
Yeah.
Yes,
We'll make
thank you
sure
very
that-
much.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
we'll let them see the video of this meeting and your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. The first item on our agenda this evening is the multifamily overnight street parking. And Mark, you're on deck.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Do I pull up the presentation or the?
Who's driving?
It's on. We just gotta, there.
There we go. All right, perfect. On February 13th, 2024, council reviewed a parking study at the multifamily parking, multifamily parking study for the heart of the city area, and it also talked about some of the multifamily parking in that area, especially Neon Apartments. At that meeting, council directed staff to proceed with a proof of parking requirement for Neon and asked staff to review the possibility of allowing overnight parking in multifamily areas. At your last June 3rd council meeting, council deferred the requirement of proof of parking with Neon. The owner acknowledged the garage was underused and encouraged tenant use. Deputy City Manager Jeff Thompson can provide some more information if you have questions on that in detail. Complaints were noted to drop to only 6 in the past 6 months, and 4 of them did occur during garage maintenance. Staff will continue to monitor that area for compliance or other issues that arise. The current overnight parking was actually put in place in 1972 to prevent storage of vehicles on the streets. The parking is prohibited from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. year-round. Temporary permits are available for residents and visitors. You can't, part of both city code and state statutes, you can't basically leave a vehicle on the street or public property for over 48 hours or it'll be considered abandoned. When looking at the amount of complaints received and citations issued, here are the stats from the last few years. I do want to note 2025 stats. Obviously, we're still in the year, so that is not a full year's of data, unlike the other years you see there. So when we first moved into the conversation about what defining multifamily for the council direction, we kind of used 2 different lenses. The first one was looking at from a zoning perspective, so medium density residential, high density residential, and then transit oriented development. Then the second framework we used was what is actually built out in the system from kind of that higher use multifamily property. 25 properties were ultimately identified through this process. Here's a map of where they are. The colors show the different land use types. The black boxes identify the actual buildings. You can see there isn't quite a direct correlation, so it's important as the council thinks about this to just understand we really need to use these 2 lenses when thinking about this issue, just due to how the city operates. When looking at our neighboring cities, Apple Valley has no parking 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. year-round. Bloomington does not have any parking restrictions. Egan has no parking from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., alternating odd and even sides, basically during the winter. So again, their restriction is actually during the day, even odd parking. Lakeville has no parking 2 to 6 for over the winter. Savage is also no parking 2 to 6, November 1st to March 31st. As we kind of focus back in on Burnsville, the options we looked at was overnight restrictions as is, no on-street parking 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. It's really that no change. Then looking at seasonal restrictions, again, not locking in on a time frame, but seasonal restrictions either citywide or looking at the multifamily only. And then obviously potentially having no restrictions, either citywide or multifamily only. So when looking at kind of a citywide perspective, obviously what works is it improves public safety from an access standpoint for emergency vehicles, supports snow removal operations, regardless of the size of the snow event. If it snows and we have trucks out, vehicles off the street always help. And then obviously providing more space for wider streets and improved visibility, whether it's people entering from their driveways, adjacent streets, or just movement along the street. Some of the challenges, obviously with overnight restrictions, is our police department is involved with the permits being issued year-round, and then enforcement is basically really driven by staff and call volume as well. Looking only at seasonal restrictions citywide, again, what works, we would still have that winter operation, generally speaking, assuming the snow happened in whenever those parameters were, and then would potentially reduce summer enforcement. At least, obviously, the overnight parking would be reduced. There may be some other new complaints that we see because of that shift. What doesn't work, it creates operational challenges for street sweeping and other public works operations more on the emergency side, such as water main breaks. And it does potentially limit the emergency response effectiveness during the summer, especially in areas that would have a higher on-street parking density. Looking at seasonal restrictions from a multifamily standpoint, again, it would maintain that winter access in multifamily areas, but would also provide more summer parking availability. Challenge would be we'd have to really create and sign these different areas, and then communicate not only with the community, with the property owners and drivers on the street of exactly what's going on so they understand how the system is supposed to work. It may create some fire access issues during the summer as more people are parked on the street. And then really tying back to number one, operationally increases some complexity for just making sure everybody understands, what is allowed and what isn't allowed based not only on the time of year, but also the physical location, and then increased costs related to signage. Looking at no restrictions citywide, what does work is it's a uniform approach. So unlike kind of looking only at multifamily areas, it'd be consistent across the whole city. It'd reduce the administrative burden of the permitting process. It would increase the parking availability across the entire city for that overnight hour. What doesn't work, obviously, would have an impact on snow removal and really other public works operational effectiveness, may create some fire access issues, and then would require signage modification. I do want to note, if we were to go with a no restriction, we then may need to consider how that snow parking restrictions or snow emergencies would need to be handled. Kind of focusing back in only on the multifamily, the snow removal benefits would be in those no restriction. I think that might be wrong. So the snow removal would benefit in the multifamily area. I'm sorry, non-multifamily area, yes, because vehicles would be off the street. It would increase parking flexibility within the multifamily area. Obviously reduce enforcement needs in those multifamily areas. Again, as referenced earlier, it would create a patchwork of systems. In this case, it would be where you can park overnight and where you can't park overnight. Winter operations and enforcement, again, would be challenging because you'd have this patchwork of systems. There'd be costs associated with signage, and then obviously limiting emergency access in those multifamily areas. So really the question before the council is, would the council wish to further consider changes to the multifamily parking ordinance, on-street parking ordinance? With that, there is a ton of information, so
Yeah.
let me know if you have questions or things you want me to circle back to.
And I really appreciate all of the information that staff has shared with us. The background was very comprehensive, and then all of the information that staff then put together after the check-ins that you sent out yesterday, that was very informative. So that's good. Anybody? So one of the things that you had is that to leave it as is because of all of the data that you had all presented to us. With what we do and what our neighbors do. And also, you did some great work in understanding their experience and what they're going to do with what they have. So I understand Lakeville is going to do some changes, and so is Bloomington.
I think they're looking into it. I don't want to speak for their council at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And staff has been talking with with the mayor and council, and so they're evaluating Bloomington, where Bloomington has no parking restrictions, but it has created a lot of problems. And Lakeville is looking at changing it as well, but they haven't pulled the trigger.
That's a great way to frame it, Mayor, yes.
Okay, very good. But Egan is still doing what they're doing, and we don't have any feedback about what their experience has been so far with what they have. And, okay. Members of the council, your thoughts? Or would you like to hear from former Mayor Dan McElroy? Because this is one of the issues he worked on. So,
Sorry.
Mayor McElroy, yes, please, join us. You've heard it and you've lived it.
That's it. I am sometimes referred to, however, as the old gray mayor, or the former night mayor. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share some history and some information. My wife and I have lived at 12805 Welcome Lane for 48 years. This policy was in place long before we came. It officially, I'm told, became an ordinance in '72. It was a tradition even prior to that. And some of you have heard this history before, but I think it's important perhaps to repeat it. This issue goes back to some foundational decisions made when Burnsville was incorporated in the '60s. And the reason it was incorporated was because of an effort by our friends in Bloomington to annex Burnsville Township to capture the property tax base at the Black Dog Power Plant.
That's
And
why
the-
we hate Bloomington.
I'm sorry?
That's why we hate Bloomington.
No, 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 we don't hate Bloomington. You
We
hate
had a
Our hated
discussion
enemies.
with the mayor of Bloomington about merging the two cities. And we
Yeah.
had a creative name for it. We wanted to call it the Twin Cities. That didn't go anyplace. The municipal commission blocked the merger, but the solution was Burnsville was instructed that we needed to incorporate the township into a city. Part of that incorporation was creating a community plan. It wasn't, there was no Met Council yet. It wasn't called a comprehensive plan, but it encompassed many of those decisions. The township board hired Midwest Planning, which was a precursor to Howard Dahlgren's firm and Dahlgren, Shardlow, and Euban. And they laid out ideas about zoning, and one of the decisions that was made was that single-family residential homes would have two-car garages and hard surface driveways, and that we would have deeper setbacks than was traditional, so there'd be room on driveways to park cars, and that we would encourage lots of 70 feet in width or wider, which was not common, and that because there would be less pressure for on-street parking, we'd build narrower streets. The vast majority of Burnsville streets, those built since planning, are 30 feet wide from back of curb to back of curb. Bloomington, which doesn't currently have restrictions, was building 35 and 36-foot streets. That makes a fairly considerable difference in the amount of room left for traffic and parking. There's actually about 29 feet of space between the curves, 29.4. When you park on both sides, most of us don't park within a few inches of the curb. We're out a bit. But I would ask, when I think about this policy, I do not think of it as a ban on parking. I think of it as an effort to have clear and safe streets overnight. And so think in terms of what we accomplish rather than what we don't accomplish. There's also the issue of, if you decide to do this, there's some collateral issues I want you to think about. Most of the other cities you were talking about don't have the elevation change that Burnsville has. We
Yes,
transition
that's right.
out of the river valley.
Yeah.
The elevation at Black Dog Road, near 35, is 700 feet above sea level.
Yep.
And the elevation just behind the Buck Hill Water Tower is 1,200 feet. So we gain 500 feet of elevation in the depth of the city, meaning we have a lot of hilly streets. I live on Welcome Lane, and between Thoreau and 130th, which is approximately 3 blocks, we gain 72 feet of elevation, which means we have hills that become slippery in the wintertime. Many of our developers, going back to George Butler and PemTom and a lot of others, left steep driveways so they could keep early trees, keep oak trees principally. In my neighborhood, we have 4, 5, 6, and even a couple of 7% grade driveways. If I try to leave my driveway, my home, in the middle of the winter when it's been snowing and icy, I almost always slide across the street. If my neighbors were allowed to park behind me, I would be deeply concerned about that, and I think it worries me. The other thing I'd like you to think about, it has been, since I was involved, a policy that Burnsville rarely towed away its citizens' cars. We didn't tow a lot. If you decide to allow on-street parking in the winter, I think you're going to have to think about changing that. And I had a lot of experience with this issue when I was at Hospitality Minnesota because of bars, restaurants, and hotels that had their customers' cars towed away, and how expensive it is and how cumbersome it is for people to recover their car. If you decide to allow on-street parking in the winter, I think you have to then think about having plowing contract or towing contract with one or more reliable towers. You have to think about where the cars would be impounded, and can they be impounded in Burnsville, or is a vendor going to take them much further away? And are you going to impose restrictions on what the towing company can charge for impounding it or for towing and storage? I want to tell you a story. I have my sister-in-law lives at Grand Marketplace.
Yeah.
And last spring, Grand Marketplace put some flyers under people's doors. They put them face down, that they were going to sweep the garage, and the people needed to move their car. Well, my sister-in-law has multiple sclerosis. She doesn't bend very easily. She didn't see the flyer. Her car was towed to Mustang Towing on the frontage road of Highway 13, 1.5 miles from her apartment, and they stored it for one night. The charge was $378.54. When I asked why it was so expensive, I was told, well, there's a contract with the apartment building, and that's the agreement that the apartment building came to, which I think means they got some of the money. Towing and impounding is not a simple issue, and I hope you will keep in mind that you would need to deal with that if you decide to allow on-street parking. I'd like to see the current policy continue. I think there will be confusion between multifamily housing areas and single-family housing areas, but if there is so much pressure, please don't do it in the wintertime. It would be extremely difficult. Thank you for listening to
Yeah.
some ancient history.
Thank you, and you make some very good points. Burnsville is truly hilly.
It's
And-
500 feet
Yeah.
and less than 6 miles, or about 6 miles.
Yeah.
So it's a fair amount.
And I've been to your home, so I know what you speak about with regard to the grade of your driveway.
And I'm
Even
glad they did
walking
it. It
up your
preserved
driveway
trees.
can-
It makes for a very pretty neighborhood, but it means that getting out in the winter is challenging. All right.
Yeah. So, thank you very much. Really
And
appreciate
while
it.
I have all of these nice people here, we were in street reconstruction last summer, and I have to commend the public works staff, the engineers, Charlie Girk and his team. It was a bloody mess, and it was handled well. And you should be proud of the city staff that made that all happen. Thank you.
Thank you. We are proud of our city staff. Thank you so much. Dan, thanks. Okay, members of the council. Your thoughts?
I'll go first. I don't have any problem with the ordinance the way it's written now, and so I have no desire to change it.
Okay.
I'm good with the ordinance as well. And if we do have an issue with multifamily, maybe we need to work with the owners of these buildings about the rents they charge and the parking for these tenants. And
Well-
I think helps cause those problems.
Well, we have
And I know we
already,
can't control that, but we could at least have a conversation with them.
well, staff has had a conversation with Neon, and look at what the changes were.
Exactly.
And so we didn't activate the proof of parking that they had to do because they solved the problem with all of the spaces that they had available underground. So, yeah. And we also know that the gallery, Andy Chase's
Exactly.
buildings, Gallery 1 and 2, have no problems because all of their people either park underground or they have surface parking that accommodates. So, okay. Dan, Kay, and Kara?
You know, I think I have been convinced that we should not have on-street parking at any time in this city because it appears to be exceedingly dangerous, and
Yeah.
we should probably just eliminate all parking even during the day.
Dan? Okay,
I spoke. Leave it as is.
leave as is? Okay, staff? I think you have direction, no changes to the ordinance. Okay? Very good, thank you. And Chief, I think with all of the information that you all have shared with us, your apparatus can move around very safely around all of that, because as Dan McElroy spoke to, it's the width of our streets are not as wide as others, and your apparatus can navigate without having vehicles on the street. Thank you. Okay. Neighborhood organizations and grants. I think this one is yours, Mike.
Yes, yes, Mayor and Council, thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for your great history and information.
I'm going to stay and listen to this, but I
Yeah.
have nothing up for it. I don't need to talk anymore.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight I'm here just to provide an update on our neighborhood organizations and grants program. A couple things I'm going to go over tonight is just a quick review of council kind of direction, how we got here. A quick update then on how things are going thus far. We're about halfway through the pilot program this year. And then we'll talk a little bit about lessons learned and just look ahead at the remainder of the year, next steps. So just a quick review. Back in September of 2024, council gave direction to staff to pilot a neighborhood program that included neighborhood grants aspect to that as well. So in January, that's exactly what staff did. We launched it, announced it to the community, and have been working with a number of community members to get neighborhoods organized and established, and then pilot this grant program. Whoa. That got,
Okay.
there we go.
Who's driving?
Nice presentation. You spin the wheel to see which screen it was gonna land on?
I don't know if I'm the one who should be talking about on-street parking, but
That was a very quick presentation.
it was very efficient.
Can you do that stuff again?
So again, council direction was to allow the, well, let me make sure I'm on the right side. Yep. So council direction was let community define neighborhoods. So work with community members to establish those neighborhood boundaries, establish grant funding up to $100,000 using surplus property sales and other external sources. And each neighborhood would be authorized up to $10,000 in those grant funds. And then for the pilot program, we're reallocating staff resources and program expenditures as we pilot this. The one-year program is really designed to make outrageous efforts to connect and reach the community and work with neighbors to, again, establish those relationships and connections. Create a simple neighborhood organization and grant program. Try not to overcomplicate it. And then learn from the experience and make adjustments as we go. So staff put together a number of resources for community members, most notably an organization neighborhood toolkit, which really just kind of walks them through the process, gives them some resources and some ideas on how to build those connections. And then really our engagement team, Amber and Ishmael, have done a great job of working with community members, answering questions, and kind of walking alongside them, community members to try to make this happen. And then we do have a grant application form as well too that is available to those established neighborhoods so they can apply for funding. So the first step is really defining neighborhoods. So we tried to put a little bit of definition to it again under the spirit of keeping it simple and letting the community define their neighborhoods, but trying to provide a little bit of structure. So again, neighborhoods we defined as boundaries are within a walking distance up to 1 square mile and no less than 500 residents within those neighborhood boundaries. So to participate in the program, neighborhoods would submit a recognition request. They'd work with their neighbors to connect and talk about eligible projects for the grant funding and then submit a grant application. So the first step, defining your neighborhood. So expressing interest in forming a neighborhood. Now this has come in a variety of different ways. It's been people calling us and saying, hey, I heard about this program. I'm interested in it. Get me more information. Others, it's been filling out the recognition request form or sending an email to our neighborhood liaison. So there's been a variety of different ways. And then staff have been working with them to try to help organize and make that happen. Get a meeting so you can connect with neighbors and talk about the neighborhood boundaries and name and organization. And then once you've established those, apply for recognition. Next step would be, again, connecting with neighbors, talking with them, trying to establish an idea for a project. Staff plans on having some pre-approved projects available for these neighborhood organizations so they can have some ideas. That's one thing that we have heard from community members is give us some ideas of what these things could be, because they, might need some help generating some ideas. And of course, we'll leave options or an opportunity for them to create their own ideas as well too. So we're not trying to stifle creativity there. We just want to try to give some framework around that. And then we will be holding a grant information session for established neighborhoods this summer. We don't have a date established yet, but we will in the next couple of weeks. And as we'll talk about here in a few minutes, we do have 2 neighborhoods that are essentially established at this point. And then the final step would be, once they've been established, they've figured out their project, they apply for funding for their grant application. The grant process, so staff will pre-review applications that come in, making sure they meet public purpose and other requirements, and then city council will review and make the grant awards at that time.
Okay.
So,
That's the update.
so that was a quick review. I'll provide a little bit of context of what we've done so far. So we have 8 groups that have reached out or that we're actively working with to establish neighborhoods. 2 have hosted organization meetings, and again, those 2 are essentially established neighborhoods at this point in time. And that notification will be going out here soon. We've done a lot of communication work on this on the front end, so we've used our typical city channels, social media, bulletin, we've done Facebook ads, cable ads, community emails. We've reached out to block captains to try to leverage their connections in the community, utility bill onserts, and rec times ads. We have upcoming engagement as well. We're obviously going to continue all the promotions that we have done, but we're really excited about this summer event season. We think that's going to be a great opportunity for us to connect with people, with our community engagement team, whether it's Party at the Plaza, International Festival, Festival and Fire Muster. Night to Unite is coming up, and that one we're really going to be focusing on promoting the neighborhood organization. People are going to be connected and out with their neighbors. How do we talk to them about how they can do this more regularly and build those connections throughout the year? And we'll be hosting informational meetings as well over the course of the summer, pop-up events at parks. And those are out in our upcoming bulletin. They'll be advertised, and we'll promote those through social and other channels too. We also have in our upcoming bulletin too, we're going to do kind of like a human interest story where we're going to be highlighting some of the neighborhoods that have gone through the process so far, just to kind of share their experience, and so people can kind of see, like, it maybe seems daunting a little bit on the front end, but like it is possible, and there's some great examples of how the connections have already made impacts in those neighborhoods. So the 2 groups that have met and hosted neighborhood meetings, so we have Parkwood South. They were previously referred to as Willow Ridge. That meeting was hosted here at City Hall. We had about 17 community members who showed up. They were relatively not connected, I would say, in general. When they met, there was, some neighborhood watch folks who had been connected and knew of each other, but a lot of them were people that had never met before. So it was nice to see them introducing each other and talking about where they live and how long they've lived there, and kind of becoming neighbors in that regard. A lot of conversation about next steps, where they wanted the neighborhood to go, what potential grant opportunities were available, or that they might have. And so, good conversation, but definitely like still in infancy, I would say, in terms of neighborhood. The next one, North River Hills, very well established and organized. So they had 72 community members come out to that at North River Hills Park. Some new connections and people who did not know each other, but obviously very strong relationships there in that neighborhood, and great energy and momentum. So they had been organized, I think, prior to this program kicking off. So there may be a step or 2 ahead of Parkwood South in terms of that regard. But great event, well organized, and definitely showing the energy that we hope to see from this program. And then finally, lessons learned. Community energy and curiosity about the program. People are reaching out. They are interested in it. But we do know that they need some support from city staff, especially the building connections and working with neighbors, organizing meetings. There's a little bit more staff support that's needed there. And leadership and structure is important within the neighborhoods. Having people who are willing to take a little bit extra time organizing and taking kind of a lead role goes a long way in making the neighborhood successful. And then defining boundaries has been maybe a little bit more challenging, not just more back and forth with community members of, what are they thinking for boundaries? We work with our GIS team to map it out and share with those neighborhoods. So just, it's not cut and dry. It's a little bit of emailing back and forth and sharing kind of their ideas and then mapping it out and getting their final okay. And so finally, timeline. So this fall, we'll be collecting grant applications and awarding grants. And then in December, we'll do we'll do a pilot program evaluation work session where we'll talk a little bit more about what we've learned and next steps for the program.
Any feedback? Yes, Vince?
Thank you, Mike. When we started this program, I was hesitant if we would get 1 or 2. To hear 8 is, I think, a wild success, even though we've got a little ways to go on some of these. Just at the North River Hills event, Madam Mayor and I attended that. The energy there was very positive.
Yeah. Wow. They are very well organized.
Are working on a logo, a lot of really cool stuff coming out of that. And so I would love if we could kind of track what's working for them and kind of use that as case study for the next neighborhoods and I'm sure we are, as an example of things that are working. I'm also wondering if, and again, you guys may already have your thumbs on this, at Night to Unite, if we can get the word out there as well, since we've got the neighborhood groups already kind of together, if we can be prepared to talk about this a little bit more, that might be a good opportunity to take kind of, a lighter version of it and say, you guys could do this on a much bigger scale. And then, if we get to the point where we've got well-established groups, I think it would be cool, and this is maybe farther down the line here, is if there would be a way to coordinate, like kickball tournaments or chili cook-offs or something like that, where you've got neighborhood groups kind of competing against each other. Just a way to kind of wrap it all together and then, taking further pride in your neighborhood. But that just kind of bubbled to the surface while you were talking. So anyways, thank you, Mike, for the update. I'm very happy with how this is going so far.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Workman and council. So we do plan for Night to Unite. Our team met a couple weeks ago, and we will be promoting the neighborhoods organization quite aggressively, I think, at this Night to Unite, including not only handing out program materials and other things, but really trying to talk to neighbors about what this program is and how they could participate in it. And then bringing neighborhoods together, I think, is going to be an interesting and a good byproduct of this. So when we do the grant application information session this summer, we'll be bringing those leaders together. So I think that's a good way to build connections, not only within the neighborhoods, but then across neighborhoods as well, too. And those are great ideas of how to further that on. I'm trying.
Keep the activity going.
Anyone else?
I'm just looking forward to hear the ideas that come from our neighborhoods.
Okay. Karen, then, you have any comments?
Thank you very much for the update on this. That is very exciting that we have had, 8 neighborhoods interested in this program. And I like how carefully you all are tracking this, because we put it together with very simplified, light guidelines, because we wanted to see what works and what doesn't, rather than make assumptions on that. So I really appreciate that, because I think that's the path to greater success. So, thank you.
Thank you.
10K?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to go back to the very beginning. The genesis of this was Councilmember Schultz driving an idea, a concept that turned into staff doing an enormous white paper on. They should probably put it on the internet and offer
It's
it up
on.
for other cities. And then it evolved into something that was much more simple and a fantastic program. I think it's absolutely great. I have a feeling that at the night tonight, you know, we interact with folks. It's going to be a competition between the city hall remodel or this program to be the most asked. And I think, for me, this program is a way to change the story, to pivot to something else other than city hall remodel and all the traffic problems with the bridges on 35. It's like, you know, we got this great neighborhood program going. So if we have some business cards with a QR code that can take them right to this page, that would be a great tool to have that night.
We will have a lot of collateral for it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You haven't just been blaming MnDOT for everything?
That's a good one.
That's all I do.
Here, scan this QR code and it goes right to MnDOT's complaint website page.
We're just little people.
And by the way, have you heard about this great neighborhood program?
Anyway, thank you, Mike,
wasn't
for the great update and, you know, lessons learned from, for instance, I think the group that's really well organized, they have a leader, they have people who are chairing certain areas, like Kati at North River Hills, and she's in charge of looking at their whole program and the visioning process, and then there's another group that's looking at the logos and all of that. So that it's so well orchestrated. The other thing is that another opportunity, and I believe that you probably have already thought about this, is having a table at all of our festivals, whether it's Party in the Plaza or any of the International Festival, the Community Festival and all of that. A lot of people are there, so they can learn about it. And the other thing is that there are already neighborhoods, because the grant program has already been something that's been doing. And I know Dan left, but Welcome Lane was one of those neighborhoods that had the grant program also with regard to cul-de-sacs, where they planted and did all kinds of things to beautify their area. So that's another thing that's going on, but really a great start. And so thank you to you, and it was wonderful. Bethany went with me to North River Hills. Vince was there, and it was well organized, even with all the rain.
Yep.
And they were able to pivot and shift. And our staff did a wonderful job of making the shelter available for their meeting, and so they can do all of that. It
Well,
wasn't rained out.
And truthfully, I know that they've got other issues that they're circling on, but that night was more about this program
Yeah.
than about,
Yeah.
the issues.
Yeah.
I mean, that was certainly a part of it, but this seemed to be more of a celebration of what they've accomplished to create this.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
talking
they're all
about
coming
ideas,
together,
about
and-
grants and.
And I thought they were also very reasonable when we're looking at, because, of course, part of that was also about Sioux Trail. But they were very reasonable, I thought,
Yep.
understanding what we needed to do together.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was about working together,
Yeah.
Just to
absolutely.
clarify, that meeting wasn't all about Sioux Trail, it was actually about the neighborhood.
This is about the
Program.
neighborhood, but of
Yeah.
course, there's that, to Vince's earlier point, that, there was something else going on. So, but they were very reasonable, they focused on the program.
Good.
But we all understood that there's another bigger issue around that, and they understood what we need to do and what our role is.
That's
But
awesome.
there was chatter about if the grants are awarded, what can we do with it, with
Yeah.
monument signs and plantings, and, learning that there's one woman who takes care of that monument sign.
Yeah.
And asking if anybody else would like, just at that meeting, if anybody would be willing to help her, and I think they did get some extra bodies, so I mean, just,
And that monument sign was also part of the beautification grant program 15 years ago. And so now they have, so Sherry's nodding her head, and so now but it needs to be replaced,
It does.
yeah. So that's something that they're looking at.
Just to follow up, Madam Mayor, on your comment about engagement. I interpreted your statement in your presentation about attending those events as, interacting with folks about this. Were you planning on having a table, or using the Burnsville City booth presentation, whatever you want to call it, at those events to help promote this and gain more exposure to it?
Yes, we will have staff actively talking and meeting with community members, whether it's a separate table or at the community engagement van, depends event to event potentially. But there will be staff there promoting, talking to community members and making sure that they get the word out about the program.
Well, get in early because, the festival got a lot of space taken away. So, might be a little tight, but we'll make sure you get a spot. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mike. You and your team have done a wonderful job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to the rest of it. Okay, the next item is the Flock Community Safety Cameras. And Deputy Police Chief Matt, you're on.
All right.
And
We're
Captain
going to talk about
Anselman.
Flock community safety cameras, and I know there's a representative from Flock that was going to be on Zoom. Two representatives from
Oh,
Flock.
are they on Zoom? Okay.
And I guess- do you guys
Yeah,
wanna
they're
take
here.
a-
Okay. Hello.
Do you want to take a second and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having us here. My name's Bo. I'm the local flock representative for Minnesota. I'm actually based over in White Bear Lake, so excited to be here.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kristen McLeod. I am a Public Affairs Manager with Flock Safety, and I have the pleasure of working with communities all over the nation to provide information about our system and really address what it does and doesn't do. So thank you so much for your time this evening.
Welcome.
So I
Okay.
think what we'll do is run through the presentation, and then if there's questions at the end, us or the Flock folks can answer those. So
Okay.
we'll start with what is Flock Safety? It's an automatic license plate reader technology that uses cameras and software to identify and record vehicle license plates for public safety and enforcement purposes. They are fixed solar-powered cameras that scan vehicle plates and characteristics, and they provide real-time alerts tied to the national database. So what we use is called NCIC, and that's where we enter things such as warrants, or we call them cops alerts if we're looking for somebody for an incident. It also ties in Amber Alerts, and then things like hot lists like stolen vehicles. And it also enables vehicle searches by type, color, make, and model. I think just as importantly, we should talk about what Flock Safety is not. It is not facial recognition. It is not traffic enforcement. So we will not be sending out tickets as a result of anything that gets seen on a Flock camera. The other thing is that it's a turnkey subscription, so there's no capital investment. All the ongoing maintenance and installation is done by Flock staff themselves. So why use Flock Safety? It supports the public safety goals and enhances community safety with real-time alerts. What this means is if we had an incident here in Burnsville, and we had maybe a suspect vehicle description or a license plate, we could immediately run that through the Flock system and potentially see where that vehicle has gone to. With that, it makes our investigative much more efficient, because we'll have that data in real time. And kind of acts as a force multiplier, helping deter crime and recover stolen property. The idea there being that if you're a criminal and you know that these cameras are here, maybe you don't come to Burnsville to do your crimes, and or if you're driving a stolen vehicle and we start getting alerts on that, or any sort of crime that we're looking for the perpetrator, we can hopefully find them with this technology. So it reduces time and resources needed for investigations. It also provides objective public evidence. So we have the data there. Here's the license plate. Here's the car that we're looking for. That's critical to solving crimes. And again, it integrates with NCIC for warrants, missing persons, stolen vehicles, all sorts of alerts. I also think it's important to note that these are the kinds of things that if we were driving around in our squad, we can enter license plates manually, and it's the same information that we would get when doing that.
Yeah.
Flock uses strong privacy safeguards. And the other thing, they're very transparent, so they create a website that will show exactly where the cameras are, how many vehicles have been alerted to, and how many overall have been noted. It's currently used by 50-plus agencies in Minnesota, including Egan, Shakopee, and Dakota County. Just to note some of our neighbors that are. This technology is closely governed by state statute, and that also requires a written policy, which we've had the city attorney look at. There's limited data retention, so I think the statute requirement is 60 days is the longest you can hang on to data, unless it's part of a criminal investigation. And then, like I said, the public transparency, the other thing is everything that's done within the Flock system is audited, so you have to have a reason to go in and search for a plate, and you have to say what that reason is, provide a case number, and it will say who it was that went in and looked for that data. Like much of our law enforcement data, it's limited to legitimate law enforcement purposes, and again, with state statute regulation and oversight. Our policy provides guidance for the capture, storage, and use of the digital data from the ALPR. Regulates the capture and storage of digital license plate data and images while recognizing privacy rights of the public, and again, restricts use to only that which is in accordance with state statute. Mentioned this before, but every search, access, or action taken is logged, including the reason for the search, the user, and the timestamp. Data is governed by law enforcement best practices, and the BCA is notified of when these are installed, and they have a website, a public-facing website that shares where the location of these license plate readers are. They are limited to collecting license plate numbers, date, time, and location data on vehicles, and pictures of the license plates, the vehicles, and of course, the areas surrounding the vehicles as they drive through. Talking about data privacy, it is, the license plate reader data is private, non-public unless part of an active investigation or public under Minnesota statute, and all data will be safeguarded and protected by both procedures and technological means. Mentioned this before, it's only for use for legitimate law enforcement purposes, and data not tied to an active case per statute must be deleted within 60 days. The custom public transparency portal includes policies and usage statistics that demonstrates best practices, and like I mentioned before, the number of vehicles being seen. Monitoring individuals, so let's say we had a suspect, a known suspect, and we wanted to know where they were going, that would require a warrant. So we would not be able to monitor a person without a warrant. And data sharing with other agencies is limited and must meet legal standards. And so we get to determine who we share data with and who we don't. Again, there's a public log showing the uses, times, counts, and locations, the number of vehicles or plates captured per use period, and then there's lists of databases used for data comparison. I think we've kind of covered this, the number of hits and the number of types of hits. There's a record of current past fixed reader locations with dates, and then independent public audits are required every 2 years. Oops, I went too fast. So the initial program that we're talking about right now, we have 20 solar-powered cameras in strategic locations around parks, major roadways, and neighborhood entrances. The idea being, generally, you want these on major thoroughfares where you would get information where vehicles would be leaving after a potential incident. The estimated annual subscription for this 20 camera setup would be $65,000. That's all in, there's no additional fees or capital investment. And this is all part of a broader, the leadership team is working together to comprehensively study and strengthen community and park safety by assessing our policies and considering improvements in camera technology, lighting, and other enhancements that would positively impact community experience. And so this is just the first part of that, being able to install these Flock license plate readers. Which brings us to our policy question: does the city council support the use of Flock community safety cameras that use license plate reader technology to improve police operational efficiency and case clearance with single real-time information to aid criminal investigations? And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Dan Gustafson.
Deputy Chief Smith, On this system, if it spots a stolen plate, stolen car, or a warrant to that, does that notify our department immediately that that car just entered the city and where that car is at?
That is my understanding. I'll let the flock folks, they can probably give a better answer of how that works.
Yes, thank you for that question. So what happens is if that wanted vehicle passes by one of those fixed cameras in your community, it will send an alert to, typically agents will send alerts to, they can have an option to send it to dispatch, they can send it directly to officers on their mobile terminals in their patrol vehicles, and they'll be alerted that that vehicle passed by that particular camera in your community within about 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Vince?
Maybe getting a little ahead of ourselves, but right now the intended use would be roadways and major thoroughfares, but I'm wondering if there was room for, say, parking lots, other areas where we've seen a recent uptick of certain activities. Is that something that's been discussed to this point?
You know, we've talked about what would be the ideal locations to put them, and I think certainly open to more discussion. We certainly could put them in the parks or on the main thoroughfare leading in and out of the parks, so you get all of the traffic going in and out. But I think that's a good point.
Okay.
Okay. Dan?
Chief, can we integrate some of the cameras we already have in place into this system?
I'm gonna look over at the IT
Yeah.
guy on that one.
A flock team? Can we integrate?
In conversations with Bo from Flock, we've discussed the ability to integrate with our existing facility security cameras in some locations with our current platforms that we have today. There are compatibilities and interfaces already built that Flock works with that would allow for that. For instance, our HOC ramp, our HOC deck, where we have cameras today, could be brought into that platform, and the streaming video that we gather from those cameras today could be brought into the Flock system and use their analytics tools with our existing cameras.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's great. Any other questions? Dan?
Question about, I'm sure there's folks that'll have some concerns about how the data is used, and you addressed a lot of those in here, right, in the city, the deletion, et cetera. Are there any other federal agencies or law enforcement agencies at the state or local level, county level, that this information is ever shared with? I mean, obviously, criminals tend to cross city lines, county lines, sometimes state lines. How is this information shared between agencies to be able to potentially get better information to find somebody who's committed a crime?
Yeah,
Or at
good.
least the vehicle was involved in a crime.
Right, good question, and so my understanding, and then the Flock folks can correct me if I'm stating this wrong, we will control, every agency that uses Flock controls who they will share data with. And in doing that, whoever's using it would have to enter the right, the reason why they're looking for it. So I'll give an example, if we're sharing with Egan and vice versa, if we had an incident here in Burnsville and we said, okay, we know the license plate, but we don't know where it went, if we've have that agreement with Egan or say Bloomington and that the vehicle goes by one of their cameras, it will alert us. So in a sense, we're sharing with each other, and we'd get that information in real time. Prior to having this system, what an agency would do is call up their, once they get their investigative team in or their analysts, and they'd call over to Egan and say, hey, I know you have these Flock cameras, did you happen to see this car? Oh, yeah, we did. It was there yesterday, if we're a day behind. So yes, we can share, but we control who we share with. And then there's still that audit trail. And I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
And that's correct, Chief. You hit it on the head. So all of those controls lie with your city, and so you don't have to compromise community safety for your community's values. It's all very highly controlled by your city as to what makes sense for you to share your data with, and meaning what makes sense, with what other agency you elect to share your data with.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, Dan Kay.
So it would seem, from law enforcement's perspective, having a metropolitan area, if multiple cities are subscribers of flock cameras, that building sort of a network of, for a period of time anyway. So when something happens in one city and, the criminals get on the highway and they try and outpace law enforcement, and they pull off and they're able to hide, the cities sharing it with each other can be a tremendous law enforcement asset. Who else could access this data outside of just the cities? Is there a state agency that has authority to inquire, or federal agencies authorized to inquire? Where do we lose control of it?
Nobody would have the authority without us giving it to them, short of, like with anything, any sort of judicial order. And again, if there's anything I'm missing there.
That's correct, Chief.
So we have control of the information, is what I'm hearing.
I have a
Yes.
question.
Yeah, Kara.
So if there were a warrant, and we do share that information, and our policy is that after X number of days, we delete that information, can we force the other agency that has gotten a warrant to delete that information?
I think it's a great question, and unfortunately, I think once they have the data with a warrant, it's probably now their data that they obtain, and so it's a good question.
And when this system is recording plates and dates and times, it's recording absolutely everyone's plate with the date and time of that, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Just another follow-up. I did a little ChatGPT search just to get a little bit more information on, risk concerns. I think it's our responsibility to just ask some of these questions so we get the answers, but the public watching or watching a replay knows that we are thoroughly vetting this type of thing. I asked if there was any cities who have pulled back from flock due to whatever, community pushback, pressure, whatever it might be, and there's only 3 listed in the entire country, which is pretty encouraging. I don't know how many cities have flock, so 3 might be a lot if there's only a couple dozen, but I'm guessing there's way more than that that have it. Austin, Texas, San Marcos, Texas, and Denver, Colorado. Could the flock folks maybe just share what those circumstances might have been about and an update on whether those cities, how long they had it, why they pulled back on it, and are they just retooling their policies, transparency, and be able, to come back with it in the future?
Okay, Kristen, Bo?
Thank you for that question. So we do work with over 5,000 communities nationwide, and you are correct. And I think in those instances, not working directly with a few of those, a lot of it is misunderstanding of the system and lack of community education. Oftentimes, this provides an incredible tool to law enforcement, but we wholeheartedly support creating robust use policy around, and we have our privacy safeguards, one of those being our data retention. Our default data retention, I will note, I know the 60-day mark was noted as a statewide, you can't retain the evidence not used in a criminal investigation beyond 60 days, but the Flock's default data retention is actually shorter. It's 30 days. Anything beyond that would require council approval and comes at additional cost. So with that 30-day data retention, it really balances providing investigative value to your law enforcement while also protecting the privacy of your constituents. All of that information, so, and while one of the council members shared that, yes, these cameras are motion activated, they are capturing a still image of every vehicle that's passing by those fixed cameras from the public roadway. your officers are only searching for wanted vehicles and in accordance with their department policy. All of that, those searches will be recorded and logged and associated with a user ID, a search reason, and very oftentimes a specific case number is required per department policy. So those searches are logged, and then they're only being alerted to those wanted vehicles. All of the other images and data are hard deleted and unrecoverable at the 30-day mark. So again, really providing some robust safeguards, keeping your constituents' privacy in mind.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah, a statement. I think, we had a recent incident at the high school with some guns being discharged, and all of us, when we hear that kind of news, we think, what else could we do to prevent those from happening in our community? I think what we all want is to make the community as safe as possible. And the question that I always ask is, what tools can we add to our law enforcement to help them do their job and keep our community safe? While they can't prevent everything, and you never know when someone is going to behave in a criminal way, there's no way to stop all that. But sometimes deterrence can have a big impact on a decision by someone to make a good decision or a bad decision. And I think in some ways, these types of cameras can become a deterrent tool. And I think it's a balance, though, right? How do we provide more tools to make the city as safe as possible, and how do we protect the privacy of our citizens? I think everybody wants both, right? Give us the safest possible city and inferior the least on my private rights, right, or my personal rights. And that's a delicate balance, and it's not easy to achieve. But generally, I think this is another great tool. I'm surprised I didn't know how long these are out. When you said you work with 5,000 communities across America, so these have been around a while. You didn't just innovate these last year and rolling them out now. So they've got quite a bit of time. That's good. That means there's a lot of experience out there. There's a lot of community experience. There's a lot of city-community relationship experience, and a lot of law enforcement usage experience that we can benefit from. Thank you.
Vince?
So, as far as what the flock system is seeking, is that determined by each department? So, and let me just clarify, obviously stolen vehicles, but we're saying warrants, are we getting down to like expired tabs? What degree of warrants? Or maybe warrants wasn't even referenced, but I guess what's the scale of severity here that this would be seeking? Matt or whoever.
That's a good question. I'll start to answer, then turn it over to the flock people. I don't know if it has the ability to read the license tabs.
Okay.
I know if it's reading off of NCIC, it's gonna be warrants, and I would imagine it's gonna hit any warrant, just like if we're running a plate in our squad. If there's a warrant attached to that plate, it's gonna tell us that there's a warrant attached to that plate. Can you guys speak to, are there levels of settings or
Maybe
preferences?
before you turn it to Flock, can you just talk broadly about how you see this used from an investigations perspective? Like, what's the why?
Yeah.
In terms of this being an important tool from the police department's perspective?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times we have witnesses who have partial information. Maybe it's a partial plate, or they know something about the vehicle, but they don't have it all. And so, we hope we don't have any of these incidents, but if we do, for example, if there was an incident on a major thoroughfare, and let's talk about, let's say it's 3 a.m, so there's not a lot of traffic, and the witness says, all I saw was it was a blue Ford Ranger. That's what I know. And our investigators can then go in real time and look up, all right, this incident happened on this road. and there's a camera right up the street, was there a blue Ford Ranger that went by? And if so, oh, yep, there it is, there's the license plate. Or maybe they don't have any information. If it's middle of the night and there's not a lot of traffic, there might only be 2 or 3 cars on the road or whatever, and it at least gives a starting point to, okay, there was a semi-truck and a motorcycle. Which was it? Well, it wasn't a semi-truck, it was a motorcycle. So it allows us to start narrowing down suspect vehicles and information much faster than it's potential that we might get information that we would never end up getting with this.
Councilmember Workman, I can give you your question. I think I know what you're asking is, we as a department or the agency get to select basically how specific or detailed we want the alerts to be. Warrants are higher up there, missing persons, Amber Alerts are things we would keep in there. We would never set up for expired tabs or even driving offenses like suspended drivers, revoked drivers, things like that, where that's pretty common, unfortunately, in today's world. That would cause our phones and MDCs and our squads to probably light up every 2 seconds with a driver coming into the city or wherever this camera is. So that's agency-based, and I just have some experience with some of the agencies next to us that have really turned down so much the driving, minor, I'd say the minor offenses, things like tabs, if you're suspended, things like that, because you can't be overwhelmed, and that kind of overwhelms the system depending on your city and your agency. So it's very department specific what we would pick, but we would choose obviously the higher, I would say, the things that are more dangerous or that are truly need some action. Driving offenses don't necessarily need that right away, but it is very department specific. For that. So.
And that's kind of where I was going was, failure to pay child support versus, and no, all crimes are crimes, right? But so I guess you kind of nailed what I was looking for. So, I had another question, but I forgot it.
While you're thinking about your question. So, Matt and Sean, the recent incident, according to the county attorney's press release, with regard to the woman that was stabbed by her partner, killed her. Was that a flock camera that also helped pick that person up?
I don't think they said that in the.
That one was not, that one specifically was not. We have had another stabbing incident that resulted in the suspect being arrested up in St. Cloud. The incident that you're speaking of is just, it was more of an example. If we would have had these installed, we would have been able to track this gentleman
Right away.
By the way, he fled to the west side of the city down to Lakeville, because he would have gone by probably 2 or 3 cameras. We would have known in real time that your murder suspect is driving in Burnsville, County Road 5 South. So it would have been nice. We just, lucky for us, Lakeville officer happened to just, by God's grace, in the right area, saw that guy down there when he exited Burnsville. So it was just, but it would have been nice to say, hey, like you said, the 20 seconds that it takes or less to say this vehicle, because we knew the plate, we knew the suspect right away. It was aired right away. So we knew that he was out, he had left, and it would have been great to say, hey, that guy's at 13 and 5 in Burnsville, because that would have put all law enforcement, probably every agency around us, to try to find that guy. So it's just, it was a good example of where it would have benefited us, and there's a lot of examples I've had that other agencies have helped us using their systems for Burnsville crimes, so.
I can think of a whole lot of incidents that took place in our community in the last year and this year where flock cameras would have been truly useful for all of you in the work that you do. So from my perspective, any way that we can equip you to make sure the city is safe, I think is a pivot to the right direction. And you need this just like you need the drones and how they help you in doing the work that you need to do to keep the city safe, because that's our prime directive, according to the law, is to make sure that the city is safe. So our role is to make sure that you're equipped. So from my perspective, this is a tool that you need in your toolbox to help keep the community safe. So, I don't know, where are you guys at?
I'm with you. I have an incredible amount of fatigue for making headlines recently, because people come into our community and decide to act poorly. And
And they don't even live here.
no, and I've had several conversations with people. I've read several social media posts. I'm tired of it, and so this isn't necessarily a response to that uptick, but if there's something that we can do to give our police department better tools to hedge off or to send a message to people coming into our community that if you're going to come here and do stupid stuff, our odds of getting you and catching you are going to go up. I'm in favor of that, so I'm good with this.
Absolutely.
You're in favor of it? Okay.
I don't have a problem with our police having access to this. I have a lot of concerns about people other than our police having access to this. There is always creep. Anytime you get anything like this and you have data, people want your data. I'm not even talking about outside actors, I'm talking about other agencies and other levels of government. And once they have it, we have lost control of it. We cannot say they need to delete it after X time. They can do what they want with it. And we have technology that is racing ahead right now, which is very exciting, but also worrisome. And we're getting into areas where they're starting to do predictive modeling using data. Well, if they can have the data of everywhere you go and when you go there, they can start to predict behavior. And it's not far-fetched because it's what we saw in our banking institutions. Right now, anything you do that's over $200 is tracked. And it's tracked and used in predictive modeling. And then they use that data to look at, should they be looking at you closer for drugs? Should they be looking at you and auditing you by the IRS? And it goes into multiple agencies. So it's not a far-fetched thing that is not happening. So when we have data like this that shows everywhere our residents drive and when they drive there and their patterns of driving, I have concerns about how that data will be used when it escapes us. Not if, but when it escapes us, and what will be done with that. So I think there's really great tools out there. There's amazing things that are happening. I absolutely see the value of this for our police department and also for working with neighboring police departments. But we are getting into technological areas where data crunching and predictive modeling are at levels that most of us absolutely don't understand, and don't understand the capability of. So I have a lot of concerns with this. I would ask, since I know council's going forward with this, I would ask that we look very carefully at that delete policy and have it as absolutely short as possible. And I do think 30 days is too long. I do appreciate that they have 30 days as their default, right? I appreciate that. I would ask from a policy position that we look at a shorter delete time. And we work with our police to find out what is that balance? What is the shortest time possible that we could keep that data and still have it be of value to you in you trying to do your job, and not go for the outliers, like what is the longest, but what is that tightest one so that, you know, we can be responsible with our technology. So that is my position on this.
Well, I'm glad that you said that we'll let police, because they're the professionals, to look at the data and say, what is the appropriate time for them
I
to do
absolutely believe
investigative
that
work?
police will work with our city manager
Yeah.
to discuss that and bring
Yeah.
that to us for policy consideration.
Okay. Dan?
Just a couple follow-up questions from someone watching our meeting. Where is the data stored for the period that it is stored? Is it virtually on servers that they own, for example, or is it servers or virtual servers that we control? And then who's responsible for the data if there's a data breach or if there's something happens? Like, who's the liable party?
Madam Mayor, council members, it is a hosted platform, and all data is stored in their hosted environment. They can speak to the specifics of what hosted environment that is. We won't have any data on premise with this system, and it follows a very strict security process in terms of how it's accessed, and in transit and at rest, it's encrypted. So in terms of the other tools that they use, that would be for Bo, hopefully, to explain, or another staff person that might be able to add to that.
Okay. Bo or Kristen? Which one of you is going to take that?
I can jump in, and Bo, feel free to jump in if I miss something. So all of our data is stored on the AWS cloud, and correct, it's encrypted end to end. So the second that image is captured, it's encrypted at rest while it's transmitted, and then also while it's held in the cloud. Did I answer all of that? I might have missed one piece of that. Please let me know.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bo, do you have anything to add to that?
No, she answered it perfectly.
Okay, very good. Do you have another?
Nope, those were the two.
You're okay? So what I understand is that council has supported the flock community safety. One of the things is to bring it back as to what is that time limit that we hold it. After you evaluate and say what is the appropriate time for us to hold that data. Okay? Is that what we have? Greg?
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members
Clear?
of the council, I have direction from you. We will coordinate with both police and the city attorney across the organization. We'll talk about bringing a policy back to you for consideration that likely will be at a regular council meeting. One of the things, one of the police department's strategic priorities for the past few years has been leveraging technology and connecting with the community. So I think we have an opportunity here to also take some of your comments in this conversation more broadly to the community, both for their information and for us to engage and educate. So we'll talk about how we'll do that and package it all together and come back to you for another policy discussion.
And that would be good, since the communities that are pulling back, and Flock said they believe that that was mostly due to lack of community education before implementation.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
Councilmember, it's a great point.
Yeah, this is important because you all heard tonight. Sherry was very impressed, and I was at my Lions Club meeting last night, and because Lions were there to help with the parking activity and so forth, they too were very impressed with the way that police handled that incident. Everybody was also relieved from the school district when I had conversations with some of them that not one of those individuals ever attended BHS. And not one of those individuals are residents of Burnsville. That's to Councilmember Vince Workman's earlier statement that, people come in, bad people, but we can't stop them. We are on a transportation corridor. It is our strength, but it's also our weakness. It's so easy to come down the freeway, hop off, get into Burnsville, and hop back on, but these cameras will also help. So when they're in our community, then we know who they are.
Now, how do we get people to stop storing their meth in our storage lockers? Maybe that could be the next thing we think about.
You want another technology?
Well,
Yeah.
once
Okay.
again, pick Burnsville, go somewhere else.
Okay. Thank you. And I appreciate everything that you all do. Thank you so much. Deepest gratitude. It's hard work that you do, and you do it well. And the community sees it. I mean, Sherry's here and she came to speak to it, but also the Lions who were there helping out, and all of our MVN volunteers who were there.
Well, thank you, Mayor and council members.
Yeah.
Quick follow-up, when will they be deployed? What, how long for the acquisition
Yeah.
process and when they're actually live?
Well, could you help me out a little bit? I mean, we're trying to get here in the next probably 4 to 6 weeks. We would start getting all going. Bo, can you help me with the dates a little bit better, how that would play out?
Yeah, so we do all the permitting in our end, so it really comes down to the first stage of getting those locations permitted. So if you guys have good relationships with the city and then county for like right-of-ways, that will help a ton to kind of get that going. And then after permits are received, you're looking at probably 2 to 4 weeks to install.
We should be good with the city. Who knows about the county?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, let me get with staff and have a conversation about what the next step of the process look like. We'll give you a better idea on timeline once we have our I's dotted and our T's crossed on what community communication might look like, kind of that education piece, but also getting policy back in front of you. So we'll give you an idea of what a proposed timeline would look like, given all of those factors.
Okay, good.
Sounds good.
Thank you. All right, we're into roundtable. Vince, you have anything?
I was gonna talk about the North River Hills meeting, but we already talked about it, so.
Okay,
No, Experience Burnsville meets while we're at LMC, so I won't be at a meeting there until July.
okay. Kara?
No, I'm good.
I have nothing.
Okay, and I have nothing too, so. Greg, anything from staff's point of view? Anything that's
I'm
outstanding?
gonna take a note from the council, I have nothing.
Or did you and you decided that's not important enough?
Okay, with that, we stand adjourned by acclamation. Thank you, everybody.